this is Nate Kipnis from Kipnis Architecture Plus Planning. You're listening to WCGO Radio, 1590 and 95.9, Chicago Smart Talk. The Mike Novak Show starts in 3, 2, 1.
First message.
Yes, Mr. Novak. Al Pacino. I was in town here for a couple days, and I thought I'd give you a call. I'm having a problem with my burning bushes. They are prematurely burning. It is only mid-summer, as they say. What the hell's going on here? We having a meltdown or what?
It's the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio. Flavored with a dash of humor. Welcome to intelligent, irreverent talk about plants and the planet they grow on. Your questions, comments, and participation are always welcome at 877-711-5611.
Good planets are hard to find. Temperate zones and tropic climes. And true currents and thriving seas. Wind blowing through breathing trees. Strong ozone and safe sunshine. Well, good planets are hard to find. Good planets are in demand.
This hour is brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com.
Jet streams, perfect air.
And here they are, Peggy Malecki and Mike Novak.
Well, good planets are in demand.
Right? Well, here they are, kind of. Not what you expect. Wait a second. Who's sitting in the big chair? Oh, my goodness, it's LaManda Joy. Welcome to the show. It's the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki. I don't even know if I can explain what's happened in the last couple of days, but I'm not in the studio. If you look behind me, you see green and you see the banner. Now, does that banner reading forward or backward? In my screen, it reads backward. Does it read forward? Can you?
It's good.
It looks good?
Yeah.
Hi, LaManda Joy.
Good morning.
From City Grange and Peterson Garden Project and a bunch of other things. How are you?
I'm great this morning.
Great. It's I'm glad you're in the studio. I wish I could be with you. I am in the wilds of Connecticut.
Wow.
Okay, just outside of Hartford. Yesterday drove through Providence, Rhode Island, was on Cape Cod with C.L. Fornari on her radio show yesterday.
Fun. I love her.
Yeah, if you go to the Mike Novak Show on Facebook, you can see that. I was on for 2 hours, and man, the calls just come in one after another, and she just sits there and answers them, and that's not what I do. It's very different from what I do. I have wonderful guests like LaManda Joy and Joan Murray, who is the plant boss. You're not the garden boss, because we know William Moss is the garden boss, but you're the plant boss at City Grange. And welcome to you, Joan.
Well, thank you very much. It's a beautiful day here in Chicago.
Yeah. What's the weather like?
It's a little bit cloudy, but it's still beautiful.
It is. There's not a cloud in the sky here in Hartford, Connecticut. So here we go. I'm Peggy is indisposed again today, so I'm hosting it from here. Except I have guests in the studio, and I'm not in the studio. It's really weird, but that's the way these things go. And do we have Rick DeMaio? He wanted to jump in, our meteorologist, because, as you know, there's a hurricane barreling down on the southeast part of the United States. Do we have him available, Andrew? Are you there?
Yep, I'm here, Mike.
Okay, Rick. Well, we got a little bonus Rick DeMaio. I don't even have my dingers with me, so I can't ding anything. I feel naked without him here. We're going to give you a quick hit here before we get to the meat of our conversation about gardening and fall plants and containers and why are your tomatoes still green and all that. But what's happening on the southeast part of the United States?
Well, the reason why I'm on early, Mike, is Hurricane Hunter went into the eye of Hurricane Jordan about an hour ago and upgraded the status of the hurricane from a Category 5, now it's almost a Category 6. And the reason why I say that is because the Category 5 hurricane has winds of 155 miles per hour. We found that basically at about 5 a.m. this morning. But the new update from the Hurricane Center now has that storm, get this, maximum sustained winds of 175 miles per hour with gusts up to 200, and the central pressure is now down to 922 millibars, which is exactly what it was when Hurricane Andrew battled through the Bahamas pretty much about this weekend back in 1992. This hurricane is going to devastate, I mean absolutely destroy the northern Bahamas today. There's a small island called Elbow Key, which I was actually on back in the early 90s. It's connected to a larger island called the Great Abaco Island in a small city called Marsh Harbor. And if you Google Marsh Harbor Airport or also Marsh Harbor webcam, you may actually see the beginning of the outer eye wall of Hurricane Dorian approach that area. I would not be surprised if that island, and it's sad for me to say this, could easily be 90% destroyed. This is about as strong as a hurricane that you will ever see. In addition to that, storm surge in advance of this could easily be 15 or 20 feet. I think the highest point on that island, Mike, is the top of the lighthouse, which is about 30 feet. This is not good news at all for the northern Bahamas. The good news, though, is that the storm most likely, after it moves through the northern Bahamas later on tonight, is going to make a little bit of a north turn, then a right turn, then begin to weaken, and most likely not hit the U.S. mainland until maybe the Outer Banks of North Carolina Wednesday night into Thursday morning.
Have a banana, Hannah. Try the salami, Tommy. Give with the gravy, Davy. Everybody eats when they come to my house. Try
And
a
that could be the
tomato,
theme
Plato.
or have a
Here's
tomato
Captain
Plato. I should have
Torre,
left that in there. The great Cab Calloway. What a terrific song. And that could be your theme, LaManda. Everybody eats when they come to my house, because I've seen your garden. And it's fantastic. Welcome back to the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki, except without Peggy Malecki. We've got LaManda Joy. You're going to join us for the whole 2 hours today, right?
Maybe. If you behave yourself.
Oh, great.
No pressure, Mike. No pressure.
None at all. No, I'm not capable of behaving myself. And I just want to say to folks who are listening, Rick, I think got cut off by the music, and so did I. But the point is, we have a hurricane of unprecedented proportions in the Atlantic that's headed toward Florida, and he's particularly worried about the islands there that are going to take 175-mile-an-hour winds. He said Category 6. I've never heard of Category 6 before. Unbelievable. And here we are. I'm blue skies here in Connecticut and Hartford. You're in Chicago. You've also got a beautiful day, right?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little overcast, but pleasant.
Okay. Are you expecting any rain there? I need to know if I need to get somebody to water my plants.
You know, we got a lot of rain last night, so you're good.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
Yay. All right. I would hit the ding.
Yeah,
I
really.
have the ding here, but I don't have the ding. And I know that's what you wanted to do. You wanted to come on the show and be able to hit the dinger.
I would have brought my kazoo had I known.
I might have one here someplace. And my banner fell over. Isn't that?
It's that kind of day. It's all right.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't take much. All it takes is I like it like that. Let's just leave it.
Yeah.
I like it. Leave it down. That's kind of funny, actually, because now you can see the background a little more, and I like that. So here we are. We're here to talk about the end of the season and what folks can do, and folks can still do a lot in their garden. I mean, heck, it's September 1st. That's all we are at the moment, and that means that there's a lot of work that you can still get done in the garden. But let me start with the question about tomatoes. I want to know what kind of tomato year you've had and Joan has had, because Peggy and I have talked about it on the show all summer, and for us, it's been kind of iffy. It's some plants produced and some plants did not produce, and it seemed to have very little rhyme or reason.
Well, I have to say that I've probably had the best tomato year in a decade.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
But here's the interesting thing. We had that cold, wet spring. We were kind of busy opening City Grange. I didn't get my tomatoes until 1st of June, and the plants were puny, because it was just so awful in the spring, and they've remained sort of puny, but maybe it's the stress of that, but they have these giant clusters of big tomatoes. And it's such a surprise. I wasn't expecting much at all this year, but it's really been quite rewarding.
Here's what I will say to folks who are watching on Facebook and following us on Twitter. And by the way, once again, as we're expanding our empire, we're streaming live on Facebook. We're streaming live on Periscope, which is the Twitter app. And I don't know, I always figure there's like 3 people following the Periscope on Twitter, but who knows? And on YouTube, we're streaming live at the Mike Novak Show channel on YouTube. So any of those places, if you want to send us your observations on your tomato year, please.
Yeah, well, it's always a surprise with tomato. Oh, go ahead. It's always a surprise with tomatoes because that's the thing everybody wants to grow, and we hope for the best. I saw a funny cartoon the other day that showed a bunch of green tomatoes, and in the background you saw a family with their car loaded up to go on a trip, and the tomatoes are saying, "They're going on vacation, let's ripen." So, we all have this sort of intimate relationship with hoping that we're going to have the best tomato year ever. I found, I like to say for growing tomatoes, if you're new to it, that cherry tomatoes are the way to go. We've had a lot of success with that this year. We've also, I always grow organically. We grow heirloom tomatoes in our home garden. We don't do a ton of hybrids, but, there's nothing wrong with them, but that's just sort of what we like. At City Grange this year, we sold, probably 25 different varieties of tomatoes. I grew all of them in my home garden just so I could talk about them later if people had questions or specifically were looking for advice on the tomatoes that they've purchased. And, I really just love cherry tomatoes in particular because you can get so many different colors and varieties, and it's interesting. They're fun for kids. They're easy to grow. You can do them in a container. It's sort of a happy place growing cherry tomatoes, but for everybody that loves the big tomatoes, that's also something that I enjoy growing. My favorites are called Aunt Ruby's German Green, and they take a while to ripen, but yes, they're ripe when they're green, and they're beautiful and delicious. Some of the non-red tomatoes, white tomatoes, which are actually a light yellow, or orange tomatoes, or green tomatoes, they tend to have a little less acid, be a little sweeter, which is good for people that maybe get some indigestion from the more acidy versions. Yeah.
By the way, so I remember at the start of this gardening season, there was a lot of concern over the weather. I remember June 21st, it was still 50 degrees, 55 degrees. Mm-hmm. How much would you say that this affected the gardening season overall, especially as someone, you just opened up City Grange at the beginning of the season? Did it have a bad effect?
Here.
Well, I wouldn't say that it was a bad effect. I think it just sort of postponed the season a little bit.
I seem to be okay.
So we, got started a little bit later than usual. Joan, do you have any thoughts about the ornamental side of things?
Well, in the gardening business or in gardening seasons, every season is different. None is bad or good. It just has different circumstances. So this year we started with a very, very wet spring, then followed by a pretty hot summer with not a lot of rain. So there have been different plants on the decorative side or ornamental side that have done really well. We've seen tropicals now are doing great towards the end of the summer. The lantana, cannas are doing good. And I think we're going to go into a warm fall, and then we'll have plants like the mums and asters, which will have a long season. Unfortunately, the spring stuff didn't fare as well just because of the rainy conditions and the cold.
I think
But-
I'm back. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
just one-
talk amongst yourselves about tomatoes. That's fine.
Well, just one thing about the cool, the bad spring, as it were. It was an
Yeah.
epic lettuce year. I've seen the most beautiful
Oh, yes.
lettuce
Yes.
and spinach and peas, and it lasted way into June, which is very unusual. So, every season has its benefits one way or another.
Yeah. So we're dealing with the vagaries here of long distance connections, and sometimes they pop out and they sometimes pop in. And I gotta tell you, Andrew, I got off Wi-Fi and I went out of my cell, and that actually was better. So just so you know what's going on this end, it's the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki. Those wonderful women in the studio are LaManda Joy and Joan Murray from City Grange. It's a brand new garden center on Chicago's north side, unlike anything you've seen before, because you guys are about learning, which is a cool thing. Give me your elevator speech about what you are trying to accomplish at the garden center.
Well, we believe the world would be a better place with more gardeners in it. And our goal is to remove as many barriers to gardening success as possible. And our motto is United We Blossom. And we feel that, as a small business, as a social enterprise, as human beings, the better off we are together, the better off we are together. So we've really made a point of being a place where people can come in, buy plants that work in Chicago.
Mhm.
They can be
What
successful.
a concept that is. Buy plants that work.
They can
By the way, you know what I'm seeing out here, out on the towards the eastern part of the United States here, northeast. Everybody is growing hydrangeas. Everybody grows hydrangeas out here. It's hydrangea madness. I have never seen. I was at a shopping center the other day, and they had this little sad, little sickly berm of low grow junipers, and shooting up through the middle of it was a hydrangea. It's just that's what you're going to plant out here, and they have acidic soil, so they
Right.
can get
Perfect.
blue
Yeah.
hydrangeas, whereas in the Midwest we get pink.
Same as, I grew up in Oregon and I'm out there all the time visiting my mother. It is hydrangea capital. And they're like the size of basketballs. I mean, they're enormous and they're healthy and they're beautiful. It's a corners thing, I think, but the left side and the west side of the country are very hydrangea centric.
I think it has also to do with the soil and the fact of the sea air. I mean, look at Cape Cod, and even when you go to England, the hydrangeas do great there. So I always kind of attribute it to the ocean being close.
It may have something to do with it, but they sure love their hydrangeas out here. Okay, really quickly, and I appreciate you guys vamping about tomatoes while my signal dropped out. But what other things in terms of veggies, because I want to get to containers in a second, in terms of veggies, what are you telling people they should be doing for the fall?
Well, we're starting to get in our fall veggies this coming week. And so fall's a great time to enjoy all those things you enjoy in the early spring. Lettuces, peas, you can plant root crops, radishes, carrots, beets. Those can all be ready before the first frost. Collards, chard, kale, which, gives you double duty because kale, as you know, is beautiful in the garden, but it's also beautiful in a container. So there's a lot of really great things you can do in fall. If you're not too tired, and if you have any room left in your garden while you're waiting for your tomatoes to ripen. But there's a lot of really great things that you can plant now and get your harvest in before the first frost and, take advantage of your gardening space. Why not?
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to encourage people to do, because too many people get to September 1st and they say garden season's over, and that's kind of crazy, because as Joan mentioned earlier, we're going to be warm in September. You can take advantage of that, and depending on where you live and what the weather's like, the average frost date in this area is around October 15th, but I know from living in the city for many years, it's often after November 1st.
Yes.
So that means you've got 2 months. And if you're by the lake, you might have some more time as well.
Exactly. Sometimes it's sort of mid-November, with Peterson Garden Project. We close our gardens the first Sunday in November, and then we go in and glean everything. And out of the last 10 years, 9 of those years, we've been able to get stuff out before the frost. One year it did snow. It was very cold, maybe 2 years ago, but the weather's been pretty temperate, or, livable at least through early November. So that's just a great reason for people to plant another round of vegetables now and enjoy them. The other benefit is it's all going to be sort of coming to fruition, ready to be harvested around Thanksgiving. And how nice is that to have fresh garden produce to show off to all your friends?
Absolutely. All right, so that takes us to containers, and that was one of the things we advertised. If you're at this time of year, there are some people, they want to do containers for each separate season, and then there are others, the lazy ones like me, they set it out in spring and hope it makes it through the summer, and then in the fall they'll think about it, and then, oh yeah, I suppose I should do something for the cold winter months, which will be very different from everything else. So Joan, what would you say? What are you telling people to put in their containers right now?
Well, first of all, you can look at your containers left over from the summer and see if there's anything that would still work with the containers. Maybe you've got an ivy that looks good, creeping Jenny. But the things that you could put in containers right now that are fabulous are asters, pansies. We'll be carrying some really special black pansies that'll be amazing. Kale, cabbage, mums, peppers. The liberating thing about the fall in containers, it's a short season. You can try things, and it's not like you want them to last for 6 months. And so you don't have to worry so much about exposure, et cetera, et cetera. You should have some fun with it.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying spruce up what you've got, but don't give up. And it's easy to make the transition if you're using kales and cabbages because they're pretty tough, and they'll survive a few early frosts and maybe even a light freeze. They're tough plants, aren't they?
Correct. And yesterday we had a class and we were talking about this. And what happens with fall containers is that some of the plants will slowly die off. But as they die off, the kale and cabbage gets bigger and kind of takes over the container. It's a really kind of a fun thing to do and to watch, because you'll plant a container in September, and by Thanksgiving, the cabbage and kale will still be there, and it'll look totally different. And
don't forget Swiss chard. It's so pretty in there, too.
Yes, thank you.
I love those yellow stemmed ones.
Yes, we're getting some rainbow light Swiss chard this week. That's gorgeous.
Swiss chard is absolutely wonderful. You're right. It's very, very colorful. So in terms of color that you want to put, you mentioned asters, and the kales are going to be purples and that sort of thing. What about a bright color? What do you want to get in there?
Well, I mean, a bright color, that's a relative term to me, what a bright color is. But, I mean, I love, like, the goldenrod yellows. So the bright yellows, like the color of the goldenrod flower. Also the gold tones and orange. So that's kind of the palette I would go. And, of course, you always can sprinkle a little purple in.
Uh-huh.
And there's also a beautiful black pepper. Sorry, Mike. There's a black pepper I have to call the black opal pepper that's gorgeous. That adds a lot of texture to a fall container.
And I'm looking at Facebook, and Tony Abruscato he's coming up next, but he's talking about the beautiful weather and what his deck is doing with this weather, which is coming up. And he also says he was caught in a Hurricane Wilma in Mexico several years back. So Tony's got a few stories to tell, and he will be joining us next. It's the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki in the studio. We have LaManda Joy and Joan Murray from City Grange, Great Garden Center in Chicago, and we're going to be talking about, well, a truck when we come back.
Get out of
Summer has come and passed. The innocent can never last. Wake me up when September ends.
Or just keep me awake so that I can work on my garden and make my containers look better. Welcome back to the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki in the studio. We're very pleased to have a couple of friends of ours from City Grange, LaManda Joy and Joan Murray. And I think on the Skype machine, if I'm not mistaken, we have the one, the only, Tony Abruscato. Tony, are you there?
I am here, Mike. Good morning.
Okay, I do not hear him if he's speaking. Okay, Tony, are you with me?
I'm with you, Mike. Can you hear me?
There we go. There we go.
All right,
Great.
terrific.
Wow, the technology's working. That's great. It's good to have you here. Tony has been on the show many times. He is the director of the Chicago Flower and Garden Show. He's been part of the Chicago Excellence in Gardening Awards, and I should mention that because we're in the middle of judging those right now. Actually, most of the judging has been done, and now the post-judging is going on. People in meetings and deciding which gardens are going to get awards this year. And LaManda's been part of that too, a big sponsor and supporter of Chicago Excellence in Gardening Awards. But the Chicago Flower and Garden Show that Tony's part of has been with us from the get-go 3 years ago, and we really, really appreciate that. But you're also founder and executive director of Get Growing Foundation, a not-for-profit that you say is growing a next generation of gardeners. Tell me about it.
Well, thanks, Mike. Get Growing Foundation is really came out of the Chicago Flower and Garden Show, where we're taking the principles at the show, how to inspire people with what they see, educate them about what or how they can do things in their own green space, and then motivate them to make a difference in that space. And so the Get Growing Foundation is doing that on a yearly basis with, right now we just finished 12 community impact projects. We're building a school garden and community education garden on the northwest side in Rogers Park. And then also we launched our new plant truck, which is going to take plant material out to different communities that are served and both underserved, but a predominant focus on the underserved communities and bringing them out much needed plant material. So we're really excited about that, and very similar to what we're doing with City Grange, and what City Grange is doing is partnering with them in a lot of cases where we're going out and educating consumers as well as just selling them plant material.
Okay, let's get back to plant truck. If I had had a dinger here, it would have been ding for a plant truck.
Ding.
Ding. And tell me about plant truck. Why is this important? I mean, when I ran into you at an event earlier in the summer, and you said, "Oh, look at these photos," and he starts showing me photos like they're his kids, except it's this big truck, and it's got plants in it. And he says, "We're going to be driving it around the city and having people come in." For folks who haven't seen a photo of it, give them an idea of what the heck you're talking about.
So we have a 1974 GMC step utility truck, which think of a UPS truck or a mail truck, United States Mail Postal Service truck. And what was done is Jason Verbeek, who's an artist and also owns a construction company, he had retrofitted this truck so that he could sell his metal sculpture art. But he was big into the ecology, and so he would load it up with tropical plants and house plants, and he would go to different art fairs, and he would sell his artwork, and he would sell house plants. And so one night I was out at an event for the Chicago Sculpture exhibit, and as I do, Mike, I just keep talking about things that I want to get accomplished in our realm of the Flower and Garden Show and Get Growing Foundation. And so I was sharing with Jason how I wanted to do this food truck, but full of plants, and how I wanted to go out into different communities and make sure that, we're capitalizing on houseplant sales, which are up 300% nationwide. And so we wanted to use this as a fundraiser for the Get Growing Foundation. But then I'm also finding out that there's not really garden centers on the south and southwest side of the city. And a lot of my friends that I was talking to over there, living in Lawndale, my friend Liletta in particular, was saying how she was doing mail order gardening because she doesn't drive, and, to try to schlep, racks of tomatoes and packs and soil and things on 2 buses to get to wherever she had to go was impossible. So we decided, I was telling Jason how I wanted to use this plant truck to provide access to plant material, and that's when he came up and said, "Oh, I have one." And I'm like, you have what? And he said, a plant truck. I retrofitted this truck, and he showed me a picture of it. And so I shared with him, again, more of our mission. And he looked at me and he said, are you really going to be able to do this? Do you have the relationships and the connections within the, the community to make this happen? And I said, I really do. I've got great people on our side that will help us make this happen. And with that, he basically handed me the keys and said, you know what, I want to donate this to the Get Growing Foundation because I think you'll be able to do so much more with it than I've been able to do. I want you to have it. And so he donated this truck to us. And Mike, to your point, when you talk about a truck, the interior has been retrofitted. It's insulated an inch thick. And the top has been cut out, and greenhouse glass has been placed on the top, so it's good, beautiful sunlight. And then the walls are basically like a pallet wood or barn wood, if you will, that are inside. It's absolutely gorgeous. And if you go to our Instagram account, Plant Truck Chicago, you'll see photos of the interior of the truck. But it's absolutely amazing. And we launched it at the Independent Garden Center show a couple of weeks ago, and the response from the industry was just overwhelming.
Fantastic. See, so now what you're telling me is you have a 1974 truck that has better growing conditions than my living room, basically.
Absolutely. I can maintain, with the heater that's in there, I can maintain 70-degree temperature in winter between the greenhouse glass and the insulated walls and the heater. It also has a water reservoir tank that has an electronic pump. And so I can water the entire truck with a water source from inside the actual truck itself. And so it's exciting. And City Grange is helping us curate the plant material that will be selling on the truck, both in business areas, so by the Aon Center and the Prudential Building and farmers markets that we get into, but then also we've been talking with Southside Occupational and working with their special needs programs, and we will have special needs kids that are doing starter plants for us, veggies and herbs that we can then take out into underserved communities, and our goal is to sell them as inexpensively as possible. So if we can sell them a tomato plant for $1 that was grown by special needs kids, that's amazing. I was out with Anna Ball on, I guess just yesterday. I was out with Anna Ball yesterday, and they talked about how they'd like to donate seeds and starter plugs to our program, which will reduce our costs even more. And then LaManda can talk about a little bit, and Joan about utilizing some of the United We Blossom apprentice programs that we're working on together, and use them to actually get retail and planning experience inside the plant truck.
Well, yeah, let me get to that a little bit, because I'm kind of curious. You're talking plants, but then you also talk tomatoes, and you're talking indoor plants. LaManda, maybe you can address the kind of plant materials in here. I inadvertently called it a garden truck, and it's not a garden truck. It's really not a farm truck. It is a plant truck, which is because you're also looking at indoor plants. And I imagine for a lot of people, those are luxuries that they're not normally going to purchase and put in their homes, A, because they don't have the money, and B, they don't have any knowledge about how to grow them properly. So what kind of a mix of plants are you looking at here, LaManda?
Well, seasonally speaking, we wouldn't be selling, tomato starts in the middle of the summer because it's too late, right? So we'll be selling stuff that's appropriate for the growing season. Or if you're not interested in growing veggies for this fall season, then you might be interested in bringing some houseplants into your home to help purify the air, reduce your stress, etc. So the same sort of curated products that we'll have at the shop at City Grange, you'll see those in the plant truck. And as Tony said, we're very excited. We have Tony, who is also my garden husband. Everybody should know that. So it's out in the open. My garden husband. Anyway, Tony and I have collaborated to develop a job training program called United We Blossom. And with that program, we are teaching people how to work in the garden center industry. And one of our goals, Tony said earlier that he just keeps talking about stuff until it happens. We're very similar in that regard. We very much want to have, at some point, a growing facility where we can teach people that are learning retail and customer service and the garden center industry and landscaping at City Grange, also customer service on the plant truck. We would also like to have a facility where we can teach them how to grow the plants. And then that helps with price point, so we can make sure that when we're going to underserved neighborhoods, there's something that's affordable for everybody.
And I think the key there, with the going into the underserved communities, but really taking the plant truck out into, like a food truck, into the business districts. The thing to remember, again, plant sales, house plant sales, indoor plants sales are up 300%. It's one of the fastest growing segments in the industry. And so not so much the luxury anymore. And what we want to share with people is how it will create oxygen and purify the air inside their offices. So they can take these back to their office space and enjoy some greenery in their cubicle. And especially if we're doing different plants that are low light requirements and other things, is that we'll be selling those plants to people that they're out looking for them. And so we're gonna bring the plants to the people.
It's fantastic, and I hope that people listening in other cities will say, I want a plant truck too. I want to drive around and show people how to do this. Tony Abruscato, thank you so much. You can go to Get Growing Foundation or go to Plant Truck Chicago on Instagram. We will be back with LaManda Joy and Joan Murray in just a second. Welcome back to the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki. For those of you turning in late, I'm not in the studio, but LaManda Joy from City Grange is, and there she is, and her buddy, Joan Murray, also from City Grange, who is the plant boss there. So does she order you around, LaManda? Is that what goes on?
We have a mutually beneficial relationship, so she doesn't have to boss me around too much.
Great. Anytime somebody has the name boss attached to it, you wonder about that. So we've got a few minutes here, and we delved into fall stuff. I could go in a direction, but let me throw this out to you. What consumes a garden center on the 1st of September as you're moving forward? What are you thinking? Because I know that to some in the business, they're already thinking Christmas, okay? But I know you're about growing and having people continue to grow stuff as long as they can into the season. So with that in mind, we talked a little bit about fall veggies. We talked a little bit about containers. What else is foremost in your mind as folks come in at this time of year?
It's a great time to buy shrubs and plant them. Because the temperatures are getting cooler, but the ground is still warm, and it gives shrubs a time to get enough moisture to get established and to really avoid some kind of a shock that they sometimes go in. After the fall is the absolutely best time to plant shrubs. The grasses look beautiful right now. So, and also it's a good time to just assess your garden and start to think about spring. A lot of times garden centers, we'll be having a sale next week on some perennials. It's a good time to pick up perennials that are past their bloom point, but you can put them in the ground for next year. So it's
yeah, the great sales. This is a good time. In fact, C.L. Fornari and I were talking yesterday on her show out on Cape Cod about fall and watering. You mentioned planting stuff. One of the things I will tell people is, I'm glad you had rain yesterday. But we get into fall and things get a little cooler, and I don't know what it is about that gets people thinking they don't have to water anymore. They think it's cool, so the plant's going to be fine, but plants still need water. I mean, if you were cool and didn't have a drink of water for 2 weeks, you'd be really unhappy. And plants are the same way, aren't they?
absolutely. I think we get burnt out. You're like, oh, good. Now I don't have to water. It's cool. The ground the stuff doesn't look cracked and parched anymore as far as like the soils, but it is deceiving. You need to, like in containers, you have to put your finger in the soil and just see like how, when it needs moisture. You can't ignore that stuff.
And you mentioned trees and shrubs.
Yes.
Great time to plant a lot of them.
Yes.
Not 100% of them, but a lot of them.
Right.
This is like the time of the year to do that. And the question I have, and I've had for years, is about grasses, because I know you've been featuring ornamental grasses lately in some of your seminars and gatherings there, and kudos to you for doing that. What about planting some ornamental grasses? Is there enough time for them to take and be ready for the spring?
Absolutely. And right now, this is the money time of the year for the grasses, so to speak. This is when they start getting their plumes, and then they're at their absolute best. Sometimes what people don't realize is that when you do plant grasses, you don't even sometimes see anything come up until July. It has to be warm. So this is the time to plant the grasses and enjoy them. And I think one mistake people make sometimes in grass placement, put your grasses in your garden or in containers in the back, so that it's not, so you don't have to look kind of at a bare spot for 2 months until they
as I tell people sometimes, okay, I'm going to give you a little gardening advice and planning advice, which is put the small plants in front of the big plants.
Yes.
And it's sort of like gardening 101 after how to use a trowel. But folks, they forget about that, don't they, sometimes?
Right. Well, it's because you forget what a plant's going to look like 2 months after you plant it, or maybe you don't know yet. So a lot of times, little plants you buy that are 4 inches are going to be a foot tall in 2 months. And so you have to read the tags and make, I think it's good to make a little plan before you plant.
Read tags?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Doesn't that just happen naturally?
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is, not only the grasses, because most of them are going to be a little bit airy and you can live with that, but when you're buying a shrub and you have no idea what its mature size is going to be, you might be in for a world of hurt. Because as you've both seen, and I've seen, and everybody in this business has seen, they plant 2 shrubs on either side of the porch, and they have no idea how big they're going to get. Then in 10 years, they can't get in the front door.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joan.
No, I'm just laughing. I'm thinking about yews all over. I'm up in Evanston right now, and just seeing that pattern over and over, or the yews, on either side of the door that are now huge.
Oh yeah, you're talking about our radio station.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah, no, busted, totally busted. WCGO. You go in there and you got to thread your way through the yews just to get into the station. So yeah, that's part of what's going on.
Yes.
So we've covered. Get your grasses done. Get your shrubs and trees. Again, great time, and part of the reason is because there's less energy of the plant that's going towards the leaves and more towards the root development, which is, in terms of conifers especially, Joan, you really want to get them good and watered going into the winter season, because once the ground freezes, they can't take up water, but they'll still release it, won't they?
Correct. And with the conifer, once it dries out, it doesn't come back. Okay, the dry branches are, once they turn yellow, brown, they never turn green again, which is a liberating thought. I mean, because you know that, you've got to keep things watered. And I wanted to interject one other thing, totally off subject, but not really, I forgot, bulbs. It's a time of year to plant bulbs.
Oh, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. You hit these times of year, and you're supposed to, I tend to forget that too sometimes. But let's talk a little bit about bulbs. I imagine you'll have a few over there at City Grange.
Well, we're going to have a great selection of bulbs, and it's going to go with our great selection of plants. They're going to be a little more unusual, little things that you're not going to find everywhere, and also bulb, just kind of quirky bulbs. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm not going to have giant, bags of landscaper size of yellow tulips or something, but we're going to have much more curated bulb collection. So
Can you give me an idea? What are some of the quirky bulbs
well,
you
I mean, like I like all different types of daffodils.
Fritillaria.
Yeah.
What?
Fritillaria.
Love fritillaria. Now, are you talking about the little fritillaria or the big fritillaria?
The checkered ones.
The checkered ones, which are wonderful, because there's the giant one that looks like a pineapple growing out of your ground.
Right.
The problem is they like really sandy soil,
Right.
and they're not going to survive for more than a couple of years in clay soil around this area. Maybe I planted them in my yard, and I got 1 year bloom. It was worth it, but they don't stick around for a long time. But the little fritillaria, they just pop up all over the place.
Yeah, you know we're only going to get the ones that do well here.
That's true, and that's part of your
That's our
philosophy.
goal.
No, that's really good point. That's your philosophy, is you want people to be successful.
Yes.
And that actually requires a different mindset from a lot of other garden centers, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, I'll give you my case in point, and you might have had some of these anyway, but rhododendrons, when I talk about rhododendrons in the Chicago area, a lot of them are going to fail. And I just wonder why we lean on rhododendrons so much in the spring, and people put them into this clay alkaline soil, and they hate it, and then they freeze over the winter, and they hate that too.
And then it just makes people feel like they're a failure when it's not their fault. They just got a plant that's not appropriate for here.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so head over to City Grange. Give us the address. It's 5500
Northwestern Avenue.
And you can go to citygrange.com if you want more information. LaManda Joy and Joan Murray, the plant boss.
Come and see us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki. We'll be back.
Welcome to the second hour of the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki. This hour is brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com. Here they are again, Peggy Malecki and Mike Novak.
All I need is good food to eat and make me healthy, wealthy, wide awake. Lettuce, tomatoes, root and bacon. What about those sweet potatoes? All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good
Welcome
food
back to the
make
Mike
me
Novak
feel
Show with
so
Peggy Malecki, except Peggy Malecki is not here today, and neither is Mike Novak. I don't know where that guy. Where in the world is Mike Novak? However, he is in the wilds of Connecticut, near Hartford, a place called Vernon. And I'm sitting in the backyard. I moved the banner, which had flopped over. So if you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube or on Periscope, there we are. And it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood here. Gosh, it's lovely. And it's really weird looking at the studio and there's nobody there in that shot. I don't even know if you've got that shot up because I haven't looked at Facebook, but it's kind of funny. However, at this time of year, it's the time when we have wonderful festivals because the weather is so beautiful at this time of year in Chicago. And one of the annual festivals that comes around, and we're always very happy to be part of it, is Evanston Streets Alive, which is next Sunday, September 8th, from 1 to 5 p.m. on Main Street between Chicago Avenue and Wesley Avenue. And let's bring in event organizer Rick Nelson. Rick, are you there? I do not hear Rick. Do you hear me?
I can hear you, Mike. Hear me now?
Okay, there we are.
All right.
Got a little bit of an echo. We'll deal with it. How are you this Sunday morning?
So can you hear me, Mike?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Good.
All right. So let's tell me about Streets Alive. Let's just get the ball rolling here.
Okay. So Streets Alive is part of the Open Streets movement, and the Open Streets movement is really based on the idea of closing streets off to car traffic and letting people come by foot or bike or public transportation. And ultimately what we want to do is have everyone come and creatively use the streets in a social and healthy way. So this open streets concept, it actually started about 45 years ago in Bogota, Colombia, and it started off rather modestly back in that time frame. But today, after 45 years, the event still happens every Sunday from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., and about 1 million people come out and use 76 miles of streets that have been blocked off to car traffic. So in Evanston, what we're doing is a little bit more modest than that, but it's still a great event for the community to come out to and have a lot of fun.
I was not aware of that history, so that's fantastic. It seems to me, as you say, it's kind of modest here, but wouldn't it be great if you could shut down a much larger area, because it is a Sunday after all? Why not? As we say in the commercials we're running for Streets Alive, get off your bike, or get out of your car, get on your bike, or walk, or just do something different. And I like the idea of this spreading, and I wish more communities would do that.
Well, I think in the U.S., actually it's a bit of a worldwide phenomenon at this point in time, but I think in the U.S. you are actually seeing in quite a few cities, many of them not necessarily small cities, but I would probably say it's really catching on in medium-sized cities all across the U.S. So it's one of those things, if you get on the internet and you do a search and you look for open streets events, you'll actually start to see that they're growing, literally year by year. And a lot of people are starting to realize that they're a great way to get the community together in really a healthy way and in a way where people can socialize. So it really is a growing phenomenon.
And I've see that you've got this is going to be really fun, and that's the other thing. It's not that you're just making a statement. It's all kinds of activities, giant Jenga and beanbag toss and mural painting and STEM catapult and bird-friendly Evanston and karate and healthy Evanston and all kinds of stuff, including the Green Living Festival, which is part of this. Tell us a little bit about what's happening with Green Living Festival.
So the Green Living Festival is always part of the event, and in a sense, there's a very long block on Main Street in Evanston between Ridge Avenue and and Asbury Avenue. And in that long block, we have approximately 40 exhibitors who are really bringing their green products, services, and ideas and presenting those to all the attendees who are coming to Streets Alive. So just to give you a feel for the types of exhibitors that would be at the Green Living Festival this year, is one of them is the NU Solar Car. So this is a group of NU students, and basically they have created over time, I want to say about 7 different solar cars. They race those cars in basically races around the U.S., and they basically compete.
Fantastic. Well, there's a lot of green activities there, and we're out of time, but I want to remind people they can go to my website, MikeNovak.net. We have links to Streets Alive. Rick Nelson, thank you so much for being on board. We're a proud sponsor of Streets Alive, and I will see you there.
Appreciate it very much.
Welcome back to the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki, and as I look into the studio, I see the smiling face of Josh Richards. How are you, Josh?
I'm doing great, Mike. Good to see you.
It's good to have you here. Josh is from the Humane League. He's been on the show before. And if all is going well right now, I think we might have Jessica Chipkin on Skype. No, she's on the phone, right?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Jessica, how are you?
I'm fine.
I have to always ask you when you're on the show, do you have your bird in the room with you?
Yes, I was thinking of moving into the other room, but I intentionally moved back to the room she's in, but I closed the cage door, so she's not cage-free at the moment.
And explain to people what kind of bird you have there, because I know you love your birds.
I have a parrot, a Quaker parrot, a baby Quaker parrot.
Forgotten the name of your parrot.
This bird is named Brody Chipkin.
Brody Chip. Now, does Brody talk? Will I hear some sounds?
He's extremely intelligent, maybe close to genius level. She's very young, and she has about 25 words already. So.
Okay. What kind of words does she say?
She says, "Good girl, I love you. Give me a kiss. Good girl, step up. Come here. Don't bite." She says she's saying "don't bite" a lot lately.
If I were in the room, she'd have to say that a lot, I'm sure. Okay, don't bite. But I don't. I don't bite. Jessica is the founder and president of Crate Free Illinois. We have talked many times with Jessica. We have talked to folks from Crate Free Illinois for years. And the reason that the two of you, Jessica Chipkin and Josh Richards, are back on the show is because there are things going on in the world of sustainable farming and humane farming. And when we had you on before, Jessica, we talked a little bit about Trader Joe's. Let's do a quick recap of your campaign for Trader Joe's. Where does that stand?
It stands in a good place. About 7 months after we started the campaign, a few of the Crate Free volunteers flew to Monrovia, where Trader Joe's is based, at their invitation, had a meeting with them. And even though at the time we weren't sure what the outcome of the meeting was, a few days after that, they posted on their website a plan to transition a good percentage of their pork products to suppliers that don't use gestation crates. It started in 2018. They listed products, and a few this year, several more, quite a few more in 2020, until 2022, when a large majority, not all, but most of their products would be gestation crate free. And they've really, really stuck with it. I'm always going to the stores, like, looking, and every product that they said so far, they've done. There's one product where I did call. They switched. I didn't see the label that said gestation crate free. They were in the process of changing suppliers. But this summer they said they were going to start switching their bacon, and they have done that. So, and they are even to the point of changing their packaging now.
When you say changing their packaging, in what way?
They put new printed labels on them saying no gestation crates or farrowing crates, which are a little bit different. So they, at first, it was the paper signs and the classic Trader Joe's style, and then after a few months, they started to change the labels on their packaging to support that.
So that's a more permanent thing, and so congratulations on that. And what I would ask you about that, obviously Crate Free Illinois, you've worked very hard in creating Crate Free Illinois and getting the word out. You've become more than just a state organization. Obviously, you're having national importance right now, and Josh is nodding there in the studio.
Well, these retailers are nationwide, so that's the impact. And even though we're Crate Free Illinois, we're based here, the concerns that consumers have about how animals are raised for food are treated are certainly like nationwide. And these chains are that we trying to influence to change are, of course, huge change. So it is nationwide in that sense. Yep.
Well, and how many groups have you had helping you with this? I assume you're not the only one pushing for this.
No, I mean we're the one. I mean, our campaigns like a specific focus as compared to focusing on McDonald's. But as far as support from other groups like Josh's group, the Humane League, there's an organization based out west, Farm Forward. Josh Ball from the VP of Farm Animal Protection from the Humane Society. I mean, he's been a mentor and a contributor for years now to our work. So, yeah, we've been really, really lucky. Mercy for Animals, I mean, everybody, we're all on the same boat with this.
Yeah, Josh, let's let you jump in just a little bit here and talk about. We'll get to the campaign, your campaign in specific. I'm going to start with Jessica here, but tell me about working with Crate Free Illinois.
Yeah, Crate Free Illinois is an incredibly impressive organization. They're volunteer run, and what they've been able to accomplish is really astonishing. That's such a credit to Jess and the great work that she's done, and also too, I've been so impressed with their willingness to collaborate with other organizations, because I think the issues we're all facing and trying to address requires us to work together to accomplish that. And I think Crate Free Illinois has done such an incredible job of reaching out to other organizations and working collaboratively, because ultimately the way we're going to solve these problems is by working together.
Yeah, I would think so. And you can go to cratefreeil.org, cratefreeill.org to find more information. There's, of course, a Facebook page that you can also check out. What other social media are you on, Jessica?
Twitter and Instagram.
Twitter and Instagram. And we have the links at MikeNovak.net if you go to this week's blog. And I want to give kudos to Peggy Malecki for putting together this week's blog. And you should go read it at MikeNovak.net. Very comprehensive about what's going on here. So we mentioned Trader Joe's, and that's just kind of a setup for your latest issue and your latest campaign, actually, which is Aldi. Aldi USA. And when you look at the two organizations, Trader Joe's and Aldi, what's the difference between those organizations in size and perhaps operation?
Well, interestingly, a lot of people think that they're owned by the same company based in Germany, but actually, it's an Aldi company. There's two brothers, but the Trader Joe's and Aldi operate as two totally different operations, totally different brands, different people. Aldi is a larger organization, and it's, Trader Joe's is large and growing, but Aldi is on a particularly fast path to growth, right? There's been quite a bit written about them lately. They're the fastest growing grocery chain in the country right now, and economists predict that by 2022 they will be the third largest supermarket in the U.S., right behind Walmart and Kroger. So they're on an incredible run. I think they're planning to hit something like 2,500 stores by the end of 2022. And Trader Joe's has always had the reputation of being like organic and hip. Recently, Aldi's is working to change their branding a little bit. They're getting more vegan options. They're getting more fresh, organic options. So it does appear that they're trying to appeal to a little bit more of a foodie consciousness, which is one of the reasons when we were thinking of our next retailer to try to influence, we thought that was interesting, that they looks like they are trying to appeal to that group a little bit more. That would be more aligned to this way of thinking, more conscientious shoppers in that sense.
And they seem to eschew a lot of the packaging materials. In fact, if you stand in an Aldi line, you got to be ready. Kathleen's been shopping there a long time, and I've gone a few times with her, and then you get to the end, and you got to be ready to load that into your bag or your box or whatever you've got there, because they're moving it out. But I like the way they operate that and encourage people to bring their own containers and their own bags. So it's interesting then that you would go to them and say, well, let's change other parts of the company culture, namely the meat products you serve, making sure that the pork products are crate free. And how has that been going?
It's been going really well. We started with, it was similar with Trader Joe's. We started with a change.org petition, which is growing, and it's really it's got a lot of momentum very quickly. We started the petition right at the very end of June. I don't remember the exact date.
I'm sorry, the connection's not great. It's hard for you to hear me, but I want to stop you there. You say the change.org petition is going well. It's going more than well. You've had 300,000 signatures. When you had the Trader Joe's, you had more than 370,000 signatures. This is not just going well. This is impressive. So it means that shoppers are paying attention, doesn't it?
It really does. And one of the things that's really amazing is that when you look at the comments that shoppers leave, a lot of these people shop at Aldi. I noticed that a little bit more than with Trader Joe's. There seems to be a lot more Aldi shoppers commenting. And some of the comments, I don't have them in front of me right now, but one that stands out in my mind is one person said, "Come on, Aldi, it's 2019. Why do we even need to do this petition?" Because it clearly says in our petition that most of the other major retailers have already taken the move to commit. Not that they're still using gestation crates, but they've all at least given themselves a timeline to stop using them. And that's what we're trying to get Aldi to do, is to commit to a timeline, to 100% gestation-free supply chain. And one of the more interesting things that a lot of people don't realize is that some of the big producers that are committing to gestation crate-free supply chains, they're not doing it for the entire 4-month pregnancy of the mother pig. They're doing it just for the last 2 months or the first 2 months, and yet they're still saying gestation crate-free. So that's an important distinction to say 100%. That means from beginning to end of the pregnancy. So that's something that we added to this petition throughout the pregnancy. So
Let me throw something in here, because we posted this on our Facebook site the other day, and somebody commented on there, and she wrote, "Have you ever watched a sow have pigs in a pen, not a crate? I have. The sow will sometimes step on a newborn piglet. She then gets agitated and stomps around more, and the piglet squeals. I have also seen sows eat their newborn piglets. In crates, the piglets can get away yet come back to nurse." Do you address that kind of issue? I imagine you've heard that before.
Yeah, I have, and I was actually going to comment on the Facebook page right before you called. That person is not referring to gestation crates. She's referring to farrowing crates, which is where the mother pig actually gives birth. So this petition is not about farrowing crates, and a lot of farmers that don't use a lot of producers that have committed to using gestation crates, they're still most likely going to use farrowing crates, which is where the mother pig is moved right before she gives birth. So that person who wrote that, she's referring to farrowing crates, and that's not what this is about. Although, of course, when you go to farms where the animals are outside, the mother pig is not in a farrowing crate, and everything is fine. But that's how I would respond to that. We're talking about two different things.
So explain for listeners who are not familiar with this what you are talking about. What is a gestation crate, and why is it not helpful to the animal?
Okay, gestation crates are small metal crates, a little bit larger than the mother pig's body. This is where she stays for the duration of her pregnancy. These crates are so small that the animal cannot turn around. They're not wide enough. The animal could just stand up and lay down, and that's about it. And that's where she stays for 4 months. That's how long their pregnancy is. Then she goes into the farrowing crate for about 10 days. Then she goes back into the gestation crate. She's re-impregnated, goes back into the gestation crate, stays there another 4 months. Cycle repeats again and again throughout her life. So that's a gestation crate.
All right. And that is what you're trying to get these farm you're working on the farm operations through the grocery stores. If they can put pressure on these farms, that might change.
The pressure would be to move to group housing, which of course isn't ideal. We say if there is going to be pork eaten, ideally you want to get the pigs out of the barn. You want to get them into a natural environment. But since pork is mass-produced, it's an incremental step to make the animal's life a little bit bigger so it could at least move around, socialize, root around. Pigs naturally root around. So it's an incremental step to allow the animal to move. And one of the things that really attracted me to trying to connect with Aldi on this is they're one of the few grocery chains I've seen that has a very specific animal welfare statement on its website, quite detailed. And it clearly says in their food policy section that they support housing that enables the animal to, and then it lists a bunch of things, such as not suffering from unpleasant states such as fear and pain, but also enables the animal to express innate behavior. So
we need to break. Hold that thought. We'll be back with Jessica Chipkin and Josh Richards. It's the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki. Welcome back to the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki. If you're wondering why I'm not in the studio, because I'm out on the East Coast and hosting the show from here in Hartford, Connecticut. Peggy has had other engagements today and could not be on the show, so here we go again. But that's the way it works. Because I look in the studio, and I got my buddy Josh Richards there from the Humane League. We're going to get to him in just a second. We were talking to Jessica Chipkin from Crate Free, Illinois, about her fantastic work to move companies like Aldi and Trader Joe's towards gestation-free crates. Let's wrap that up. You were saying you were talking about that when we left, and I want to also ask you about a meeting you've got planned with Aldi. So go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, so I just want to say that what was interesting on their website, on their animal welfare policy on their website, it says that they support the good animal welfare means to them the ability for an animal to express innate behavior. And that kind of was the thing that struck me the most. I think any scientific evidence would show that innate behavior for an animal involves moving, at the very least.
just moving, huh? Okay. And you've got a meeting set up with Aldi, or at least you're working on it right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I was really excited. They have reached out for a meeting, and we're working on that now. So we're excited and hopeful and grateful that they did that.
It's fantastic. Well, I hope the same thing happens that happened with Trader Joe's. Although, as you mentioned, what we're talking about here is not a sea change. We're looking towards subtle shifts in some of these companies, aren't we? It's not. They don't just transform overnight. You have to keep applying pressure, don't you?
I certainly would like to think that if an organization makes a commitment, they mean that on every level. But obviously, you have to keep watching. But I always like to give organizations the benefit of the doubt. And I think Aldi really gets it. Just one thing I wanted to say before, Mike, that you would really like about them is they have committed to eliminate plastic packaging by 2022 from their supply chain. So they get it. They understand how important these types of things are to people.
Good for them. So that's just, there are many steps they can take, and that's another one. So, Josh, let's get to you, because you're dealing, you work with Jessica on some of these issues, like the crate-free issues, but there's another one that you're at the forefront of, and it's a hashtag, I'm not loving it. Tell us about that. What is that all about?
Yeah, so the I'm Not Loving It campaign is a campaign against McDonald's, and it's part of the Humane League's broader 88% campaign. And what the 88% campaign aims to do is address the worst abuses faced by chickens raised for meat. And roughly 88% of all the land animals killed for food in the U.S. every year are chickens raised for meat. So this is a huge issue, and making changes here has a huge impact. And so while over 140 major food companies have signed on for the specific changes we're asking for, McDonald's has been a notable exception to that. So McDonald's has failed to address three key issues that are part of the 88% campaign ask. So the first thing that McDonald's has failed to address is the issue of breed. So the breed of chicken that McDonald's currently uses has been bred to grow so large so quickly that it suffers from a host of painful and life-threatening health issues. So here we're talking about things like leg deformities, heart attacks, organ failure, respiratory problems. And this is all pretty remarkable given that when they're slaughtered, they're only 7 weeks of age. So they're still chicks. And so these birds have been bred to grow such large breast muscles and their skeleton and organs can't keep up that even though they're just chicks, they can die of heart attacks and organ failure. It's truly remarkable. So the first thing we're asking McDonald's to do is to commit to switching to a healthier breed of chicken. In addition to that, we're asking that McDonald's provide these birds with more space to move around and exhibit natural behaviors, very similar to some of the issues we see with gestation crates. In this case, while they're not in crates, they're kind of victims of their own body, and the stocking density is so high that they have very little room to move. So providing them with more room allows them to engage in natural behaviors. And then lastly, we're asking that McDonald's commit to clear and sufficient environmental enrichments. So here we're talking about litter quality, natural lighting, things of that nature.
Yeah, we've, if you follow the show, this is something we've talked about before, and you've seen any number of different documentaries. What was, Jessica, the one we did in the spring, or in the winter, actually?
Yeah, eating animals.
Eating animals, right. And Peggy and I were there, and Bill Turk from Playtime with Bill Turk and Carrie Kendall was there moderating a panel. And you saw some of this. And when you see it on film, it moves you. You know that this is not right. What's also amazing, Josh, is to think you've got these chicks with all these problems, and people are eating them.
Right.
By the millions, okay?
Yeah, and
is that something you really want to be doing?
Right. It's really remarkable, too, because, like, you know, along with these issues that affect the chickens themselves, you know, the suffering they go through, there's also, like, issues you see. There's something called woody breast, where the breast meat is hard and woody. There's something called spaghetti meat. It's like, so, you know, in addition to the significant welfare problems, I think also, too, like, as we inform consumers about these issues, there's probably not too many people thrilled to be eating that. So while I think, you know, the suffering issue is the most important issue, there's also all these other things that consumers aren't aware of, because McDonald's obviously isn't going to be advertising those sort of things. What they're showing consumers isn't the truth of the situation. It's sort of, you know, what looks nice to them.
Andrew, were you trying to get a hold of me for something? We might as well just... Any problems?
So basically, Jessica's no longer on the line. We're trying to call her again, but we're getting voicemail. So.
Okay. All right. We lost Jessica there for... we don't know if we'll be able to get her back. We'll see what happens. Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate that. Not a problem. So, Josh, where do we stand? You've started this campaign. How successful has it been? Is McDonald's paying attention?
Yeah, so McDonald's is definitely paying attention to the campaign. So this campaign is historic in a number of ways. So for the Humane League specifically, it's the largest campaign we've ever run. But it's also historic because it's the first time a group of major animal protection organizations have come together with a unified ask of a company. So we're actually working with Mercy for Animals, Animal Equality, Compassion Over Killing, and a number of other organizations in a united ask of McDonald's. So since the campaign launched in March of 2018, there have been some significant moments and some signs of, you know, hopeful progress. There have been hundreds of thousands of petition signatures. There have been hundreds of on-the-ground actions, tens of thousands of online actions. We have had ads running in major newspapers. We have had news coverage in these newspapers. We've had a billboard in Times Square. So there have been a number of, like, key developments in the campaign. Most recently, around McDonald's shareholder meeting this past May, there were demonstrations throughout the week in Chicago. And actually, for the first time in McDonald's history, they moved their shareholder meeting to a location outside of the Chicago area. So we were also in Dallas doing demonstrations on the ground there. But I think the sort of biggest kind of like indication that I think we can be hopeful that McDonald's will eventually get on board is that so many other companies have started to fill the void of McDonald's leadership. So I'm really happy to be able to announce that just this last week, a major Chicago food company, Conagra, which is like a packaged food company, so selling, you know, packaged food in grocery stores, committed to this ask, and they're an $8 billion a year company. So I think as we see more companies, Chicago-based companies, and McDonald's direct competitors, like Burger King has signed on to this, Subway, Chipotle, Jack in the Box, Sonic, so many companies are sort of filling this void of leadership. And so I think the pressure is always increasing on McDonald's to make those same changes.
And what specifically is the ask?
Yeah, so the ask is basically to meet those three things I outlined by 2024. So to commit to switching to a healthier breed of chicken. These are breeds of chickens that have been certified by the Global Animal Partnership and the Royal Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. So switching to the healthier breed of chicken, providing the birds with more space, and then having clear commitments to environmental enrichments. So those are sort of the asks that we're making of McDonald's. McDonald's has already committed to improving the slaughter method, which is another part of the 88% campaign. So there's been some progress on that front. But those other three key areas are where McDonald's are really falling behind.
And again, if you want to participate in this, we have the change.org petition at MikeNovak.net. You can take a look at that if you haven't signed it and you feel like you want to do that. Tell us about, Josh, the work of the Humane League in addition to what you're doing with the I'm Not Loving It campaign.
Yeah, so the Humane League is an international nonprofit. So we have offices in the United States, Mexico, Japan, and the UK. And so our mission is to end the abuse of animals raised for food. So we work at the institutional level with corporations to get them to implement significant changes to their animal welfare policies. We've had a ton of success in our cage-free campaigns for laying hens. Over 400 major food companies have made those commitments. We have some major companies already reporting 100% cage-free in their supply chain. So we've seen major shifts in that direction. We also support legislative initiatives, so ballot initiatives in various states. So Proposition 12 was a huge one in California recently that we supported. And then we also do work at the individual level to help empower people to make better choices in their diet, to make more compassionate choices in their diet. And so I think by working at sort of the individual and the institutional level, we're able to accomplish a lot. And then we also do work just to empower the movement in general. We have the Humane League Labs, which does research that's just aimed at helping the movement generally. And we also provide training and leadership opportunities to volunteers in communities across the globe. So we try and we focus exclusively on farm animals to be as effective as possible, but we work at various different levels to have as big of an impact as we possibly can.
I was going to mention that obviously there's the Humane Society out there, but you work more, I assume, with farm animals and those kinds of issues.
That's exactly right. So we find in the work that we do, if we focus exclusively on animals raised for food, farm animals, that we're able to be much more effective. The Humane Society is a much larger organization than we are, and they do great work across the spectrum, and we work with them a lot on farm animal issues as well. But for us, like really having that narrow focus really allows us to be as effective as we possibly can be.
And I think what we're doing, we're going to have to leave it at that, but the fact that we bring this up, the most important part is making people aware
100%.
that something like this is happening. So then it's on them. I hope that folks are moved to do more research, to go to my website, to go to your website, and check it out. And then you can make intelligent consumer choices. Josh Richards, thank you so much for being on the show. And Jessica Chipkin, thank you for being on the show. All that information at Mike Novak. Oh, you're back. Goodbye, Jessica.
Bye-bye.
For the Bahamas, northwestern Bahamas. Rick, are you with me?
I'm with you, Mike. It's more than rain, though. It's like being in a washing machine.
Yeah, no kidding. But this is, I'm looking at the bulletin you sent me earlier, and they don't mince words at all at the National Hurricane Center and Central Pacific Hurricane Center. They say Dorian becomes the strongest hurricane in modern records for the northwestern Bahamas. Catastrophic conditions occurring in the Abruscato Islands. Holy smoke.
Yeah, the Abaco Islands is basically that northern part, and is a little bit of a kind of an elbow-shaped key. They actually call it Elbow Key, and I was actually on that particular island years ago, and it's amazing. I think I mentioned this before at the top of the show. The tallest part of most of those islands is not more than 20 or 30 feet. So when you have a 15 to 20-foot storm surge powered by sustained winds now up to 180 miles an hour with gusts to 200, I quite frankly can't even begin to comprehend what it looks like currently on that particular island and what it will look like once that hurricane finally departs. I mean, you can have complete devastation, literally to an island that houses, I believe, somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000 people. Not only that, and you know, I have these discussions all the time with people who are constantly climate change deniers, where it's like you don't want to do anything to offset the economy. And I keep having these questions come to my mind is what's the best way to really talk to someone about something that is sensible is to bring something up in the past. So typically when climate change deniers say don't do anything to change the environment, I bring up this question. Do you have car insurance? Do you have homeowners insurance? And most of the time they'll say yes. I go, do you base the amount of homeowners insurance you have on the price of the car now and the price of the house now, or the price of what it was 1,000 years ago? Because we constantly hear from these people by saying, yeah, but things have always been this way. They've been changing. Look what it was around like 1,000 years ago. And you know what I typically say to that? I go, yeah, you're right, but let's get to the point of question now. Do you think you should have some sort of adaptation or mitigation along the east coast of the United States in preparation for more and more of these hurricanes? And by the way, Mike, this is now the 13th Category 5 hurricane in the Atlantic and the Caribbean since 2003. That's a mind-boggling number. Even if this hurricane doesn't even reach the Florida coast, the hurricane force winds now extend out to nearly 45 miles. And even if it's 50 miles offshore, you're going to have hurricane force winds coming in from the north for literally 48 to 72 hours. And I can't even imagine what the beaches from basically Daytona Beach up to about Savannah, Georgia, are going to look like over the next couple of days. Are you going to tell me you're going to provide the same amount of insurance to those people on the beach that you did 50 years ago, 100 years ago? The metrics are just not there. And I wish these people would begin to wake up and smell the coffee.
It's yeah, and you say 180, and I have to admit I missed it this morning because I was preparing to do this. You know, I'm out here in Connecticut and trying to set up the broadcast, and so I didn't. And normally I would have turned down the TV because when there's a hurricane like that, I usually want to see what's going on. And I'm looking at the photos, and I've never seen anything like this. I mean, I'm sure there have been, but it's 180 miles. You said 175. 2 hours ago, and now it's gone up 5 more miles. That's remarkable. And this is a storm that, when it started, nobody was saying much about it. They said, well, it might be a Category 1, it might hit Puerto Rico. It kind of dodged Puerto Rico. Was the intensity, the intensification, did this catch people off guard?
No. I even on Thursday, we were looking at a Category 4 basically forming in between the Bahamas and the east coast of Florida. That was always known. We knew that was going to happen. Now, granted, the forecast was for a Category 3 by Saturday. It ramped up to a 4, and we at least thought it was going to be a low end, if not medium end, 4 by today. But the fact now that it's up to a 5, what does that tell us? That tells us that the ocean and the atmosphere have the ability, sometimes beyond even computer models, which are very sophisticated, to generate a storm of this magnitude. So what does that tell you? Do you prepare for the least, or do you prepare for the worst, and at least make sure that the people who live in those areas of the Bahamas and also the east coast of Florida, as well as Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, to make them understand that we agree with the science and we're going to do whatever we can to help them protect their life and their property. Scientists are not bad people. We are good people. We're always trying to make sure that we're doing stuff for the benefit of people and not trying to hurt the economy. So I wish that narrative would stop.
I can't even imagine people who think that scientists are doing this. And I met a scientist, an oceanographer, that I spent time with the last couple of days. Just remarkable guy who's been down to the bottom of the ocean dozens and dozens of times, and I'm so jealous of that. I just think about that. But you know, when scientists get accused of doing this for their own nefarious purposes, you think, Well, what do they have to, how do they stand to benefit from telling the science, telling the facts, telling the truth about something like this? It's the people who deny it that seem to me have the other agenda in mind, and so I'm with you, Rick. I don't get that. So let's look at. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
The track of this, and how is it going to affect Florida and the Carolinas and Georgia?
Right. It does look like it's going to continue to move west. It's probably going to make the right turn maybe by late tomorrow, if not maybe tomorrow night and into Tuesday. And it does appear that it's going to miss Florida, it's going to miss South Carolina, it's going to miss Georgia, and probably click the area of North Carolina. However, as I mentioned before, even if it's about 50 to about 100 miles offshore, the fact that it's moving really slow and the fact that it's now generating tremendous surge and tremendous surf is going to have a devastating impact. If you look at the way the coast of northeast Florida, South Carolina, and Georgia are shaped, Mike, it fits right into the overall wind pattern. So when you're taking northeasterly winds for 3 or 4 days and you're basically taking all of the beach and all of the sand from north to south, you are going to have catastrophic sand erosion along those beaches that sometimes may take 5, if not 10 years to replace. And the questions are this: are we then spending money to put food into people's bellies and to fund kids who are low income to have books on their tables in school, or are we funding to have more beaches built up year after year after year? The questions are really excellent to ask, because at what point did the ethics go from having beaches, which obviously is going to help the economy from a recreational standpoint, but where does education come in at that standpoint? Bottom line, any way you look at it, it looks like the storm is probably going to miss the main parts of the United States and, again, clip the east coast of North Carolina.
Okay, give us a 30-second forecast.
All right, nice today, nice tomorrow, beautiful weather for Labor Day tomorrow, upper 80s, and then we'll talk more about how the summer of 2019 panned out next week, Mike. Have a great time in Connecticut.
Thank you, Rick. I really appreciate it. I want to thank all of my guests, LaManda, Joy, and Joan, and Jessica, and Josh, and, of course, Ellie, and what's his name? Yeah, Andrew, for keeping the ship afloat. Okay, get ready to join in. I'm going to give you the question. Go green or...
Go home.
Okay, good enough.
How'd you like it?
I don't know. I slept through the whole thing.
Well, you didn't miss much.